Right back into it with Meteor. Take it down, Leaf. Able to find one. Jumps in and finds the shot point blank.
Last player standing.
Was trying to be the hero. Cannot. It's showing.
G2 have been silently perfecting the art of retakes, reaching a 46.2% retake win percentage at Masters Bangkok this year. This is incredible because the average retake win percentage at Bangkok without G2 was only 29.7%. So it means that G2 are somehow winning 16.5% more retakes than the other best teams in the world. In this video, we're going to leverage data insights and analyze some of their amazing rounds to take a closer look at what G2 are really doing better than everyone else on their retakes. We'll also hypothesize a couple ideas to counter their playstyle and see what we can all learn from G2's strong fundamental understanding of map control. In my last video, I touched on their retakes on Pearl during their grand final against T1. So let's start there and then take a look at the retakes on other maps as well to see if we can make out some general patterns with how they retake. The main thing I pointed out from my last video is how G2 leveraged their Chamber Yoru comp to control mid on Pearl. This allowed them to have stronger positions for the retake if teams rushed sites, but also meant that if mid was targeted, Chamber and Yoru could escape without getting caught and still be around to obtain valuable information to make the correct rotations. It was obvious during Pearl that Leaf's positions on Chamber were a crucial part in securing the retakes towards A. He helped maintain art control early into the retake process, and he was also able to deny T1's lurker from taking certain flank timings. In the off round, he's also set up to look for the flank, and all his positions in mid were a major piece of G2's retakes. With the data from Bangkok, I looked at every round where G2 played retake on Pearl's A site. I plotted the positions of each G2 player at the moment the spike was planted, so we can see the positions that G2 are controlling prior to the retake. You can see that they have a ton of mid and art control right as the bomb goes down, and this is a big difference compared to weaker retake teams. When we look at T1's positions when the bomb is planted, their mid control is significantly weaker in comparison. By the time the spike is planted, T1 are just barely working up mid, if at all, and have weak timings to contain attackers. Here's a round where T1 are playing retake against G2, and you can see that they don't even try to work off any mid control. As you can see Neon backing out to spawn. Since G2 were able to maintain full control of mid and art, they could comfortably focus on the flood from backside and win all their gunfights. Here's another round from T1 where they do have Killjoy play from mid, but clearly don't have the same level of control that G2 had. T1's timing and art is really weak, and G2 are able to plant the bomb and also maintain their art control at the same time, securing really strong positions for their post plant again. The way that G2 controlled mid on Pearl was a big factor in how successful their retakes were, but if we go back to the positions plots, we can see another big pattern in G2's positions on the retake. At the moment the spike is planted, you can see that G2 are 100% prepared for a retake with a ton of control towards backside already. It's almost as if it's a trap for attackers to plant in these situations because G2 are already looking to encroach on attackers before the spike is even planted, and this is something we'll come back to when talking about countering G2 later on in the video. You can see that T1, on the other hand, started out retakes much more loosely spread out throughout the map, and many players were still rotating into the site. This means there are a lot more holes and timings that attackers can take advantage of after planting the bomb, because T1 still needs some time to get into retake positions. Now, it's pretty obvious that being prepared and having all this backside control early on in the retake is going to improve your chances at winning. But how are G2 always so prepared in the first place? Because it wasn't just Pearl where we were seeing this happen. It's a pattern that we see on all the maps they play. Abyss is another map where G2 has an incredible retake success rate, and when we look at their positions on Abyss during their A retakes, we see the same pattern as we did on Pearl. G2 are already moving into position long before the bomb is even planted. They're prepared for aggressive pushes into spawn and heaven, while their flanks are already about to reach A main. Compare this to Team Liquid, who won 5 out of 5 of their Abyss games this year, and you can see a clear difference in their positions when they retake A. The moment that the spike is planted on A, Team Liquid still have a lot of players towards the B side of the map, and they need a lot more time getting into position. So how are G2 able to look so much more prepared than Liquid on Abyss retakes, despite Liquid clearly being one of the best Abyss teams in the world? The key is G2's fundamental understanding of how to push and pull map control. Let's take a look at this round from G2 against Trace at Bangkok. Again, we're seeing Yoru and Chamber being used on Abyss, which are both agents that perfectly support this style. It might sound weird since you think something like Harbor or Gecko would be better for retakes, but let me explain why G2 understands the real truth behind retakes. In this round, G2 starts with Yoru creeping up mid with a TP to escape, while Breach throws an early stun in A main to control it with Chamber. Trace starts out slowly without forcing control on any part of the map. They try and throw some info denying utility in mid in hopes of baiting a peek from G2, but G2 don't take any big risks because they've already set up Yoru and Chamber to get the info they need. 30 seconds into the round, Trace moves back towards A main, but since G2 were proactive in the early round, Chamber still has A main control on an off angle. This allows him to break the Sova drone instantly, get a kill, and then TP out. Even without getting a kill here, Chamber has denied info from the drone and gained valuable information for the rest of his team to react. Off of this, you can see G2's mid players start to move, working up the flank diligently while Trace set up to hit A. Since Trace ran into Chamber's pressure in A main, Trace are now a lot slower on their exec and are more cautious in setting up their utility. This all buys valuable seconds for G2 to walk up the flank. And now watch what Chamber does on site. G2 already knows that they want to look for a retake, but Chamber stays a couple extra seconds to break the Sova dart, and this continues to draw out all this utility from Trace. Now, when Trace enters the site, they're expecting resistance from the player back site, and you can even see them tap the bomb to try and bait a fight, but Chamber is long gone, and this just buys even more time for the flank to come in. While G2's flank is coming in, the rest of the team is expecting aggression elsewhere, and Chamber spots an aggressive push towards spawn. This information signals to the rest of G2 to flood out A main and Heaven, cutting off any space that Trace have to play from, and it gives them no chance to win the round. Trace had a full buy and got the spike down, but weren't able to get a single kill because G2 herded them into A like sheep. The truth is, G2's retakes are just a side effect, or rather an inevitability of perfect map control and team play fundamentals. The retakes have nothing to do with cool utility combos or plant stalling gimmicks like we usually see from teams on the retake. G2's retakes are entirely based on the fundamentals of map control and information warfare, and they've realized that Yoru and Chamber are the perfect picks for accomplishing those goals, but this is not something they necessarily rely on. The beauty of relying on fundamentals is that you can still play similarly regardless of the comps you're running, and we saw that G2 were already playing this way in 2024 without Chamber or Yoru in their comps, like in this clip against Preparedness on Icebox. They're still herding Preparedness towards A and trapping them on the site that they decided to plant the spike. Yoru, Chamber, and even Vice in 2025 have just made their systems on defense even stronger, but they still rely mainly on their macro fundamentals to win rounds and are simply the best team in the world at using map control to win rounds. This is such a suffocating playstyle to play against, so how do you even begin to counter this type of game plan when you're on attack? If we look at G2's C retakes on Lotus, we again see a similar pattern where G2 seems quite prepared for the retake before it even begins, and this is undoubtedly a situation you have to try and avoid. If G2 are prepared for it, planting the spike just seals your fate against them. However, Lotus is a special map that makes it harder for G2 to pull off the retake style, not only because there are 3 sites, but mainly because the attacker rotation paths are very unique. Attacking teams love to abuse the revolving door in B main or the broken door path through A link to threaten a lot of different types of fake execs and fast pivots, and this inherently makes it harder for G2 to herd attackers around like they do on other maps. So Lotus is going to give us a couple hints on how to solve their defense. Watch this round from EDG where they start with fake A main presence in order to take control of B main. G2 decided not to fight for A main control in this round, and they swapped their control to C mound instead. This gives EDG an opportunity to fake a lot of pressure towards A. When EDG have their Omen open the door and throw his Paranoia, it draws G2's rotates and a Teo ult. Now EDG have created a perfect timing to hit B, but even with such a good fake from EDG, you can still see that G2 are prepared to move into another retake, with Omen already working up mound with the rest of G2 getting in position. But playing a post plant is not something that EDG want to deal with just yet. Instead of planting B, EDG plow themselves through C-Link and completely break apart G2's preparations for a B retake. Now EDG aren't planning the spike on the site that G2 have them trapped in because they've completely opened up a new map state, and G2's retake plans are thrown out the window. EDG showed this round that fake pressure can pull G2 to rotate around too early, because even though G2 aren't looking to flood sites on the spike plant, they still need to be prepared for the retakes to be successful. If you continue to delay your plant in exchange for taking more map control, eventually you can find a game state where G2 aren't prepared for a retake, and this is exactly why Furia found success against G2 on Lotus recently. Furia played aggressively to take control, but instead of moving into execs and forcing plants from their positions, they constantly looked for opportunities to change the map state by opening up control in other parts of the map. This would cause G2 to move preemptively since they're expecting some retake scenario, and this would give Furia opportunities to pivot and keep catching G2 off guard. G2 obviously seemed a bit cold at the start of this match and were a little less disciplined than we were used to seeing from them. But the truth is that Furia's macro was correct. They dragged out the rounds and delayed their execs and plants to look for other opportunities, and this meant that G2 were just not in the same comfortable game states that they're used to. Here's a round on pistol where Furia starts with that A main fake control like we saw from EDG. Furia also has Omen open the door to manipulate rotates while the rest of the team creeps back towards C. Remember that this plot is how prepared we normally see G2 for their C retakes. They already have heavy control in spawn and a flank moving into position. But now, when Furia are planting the spike on C, some G2 players are still rotating in, and the flank has not even made it up B main yet. This gives Furia enough breathing room to actually set themselves up for a post plant. As you can see, Omen has enough time to walk all the way back to spawn to clear the flank on a better angle at a better timing. This is how you have to play against G2's style. But the thing is that most maps aren't like Lotus for attackers, so you can't just run fake control over and over and pivot all the time. So what do you do on other maps? To generalize, the biggest mistake that attackers make against G2 is thinking that the spike plant is the main goal for their attack side. If teams are focused on the superficial goal of planting, G2 is going to eat you alive. But if your main goal is not planting the spike, but playing for map control instead, you can challenge G2's retake prep and give you a way higher chance of winning post plants before you even plant the spike. We saw Vitality on Bind constantly delay the plant and tap the bomb just so they could fight for control over and over to ensure that G2 were not comfortably set up for their retake. Even though G2 were already closing in on site in multiple rounds, Vitality never planted the bomb until they were sure they had a good game state for their post plant. This gave them a lot more chances to win attack rounds despite looking like they were being herded by G2. You must focus on winning the map against G2 before you plant the bomb, because otherwise there's going to be an inevitable outcome for your post plant, and this is exactly how G2 won 46% of all their retakes at Bangkok. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.